You've seen Cobras, Mustangs, even Boss 429S. But Ford's wildest machines never made it to the brochures. These weren't optioned, they were whispered about. Factory freaks, acid-dipped assassins, turbocharged test mules, each one built in shadows, raced in silence, or crushed before daylight. These are the Fairlanes that weren't sold, because they were never meant to be. When people think of Fairlanes, they picture mild-mannered mid-size Fords. But buried deep inside Ford's skunkworks were 8 machines so radical they never made it to public roads. These weren't production cars. They were concept weapons, quarter-mile killers, and engineering testbeds meant for internal eyes only. Some were built for war, others for styling clinics. A few were so fast they were banned before they could blink. In this video, we're digging through the archives to uncover the 8 most forbidden Fairlanes ever created, and why Ford tried to erase them from history. Top 1. 1960 Fairlane Spaceliner. It looked like a UFO landed on 4 white walls. And for good reason. It practically was. In 1960, America was obsessed with rockets, ray guns, and the space race. While Ford played it safe in showrooms, 2 madmen, Gene Winfield and Darryl Starbird, built a Fairlane no one at Dearborn dared to imagine. Commissioned as a one-off custom, the Spaceliner was a full-on jet-age fantasy. A stretched, fiberglass-bodied concept car with a see-through twin-bubble canopy that looked ripped straight from a Buck Rogers comic. Riding on a modified Fairlane chassis, the body was drenched in iridescent metallic blue, chrome fins and teardrop taillights. It sat low, wide, and impossible to ignore. The interior was every bit as surreal. Twin white vinyl bucket seats, a domed plexiglass roof that sealed the cockpit like a fighter jet, and a dashboard that wrapped around like a spaceship command module. Everything screamed Tomorrowland. But Ford didn't build it, they didn't commission it, and yet they didn't stop it. Rumor has it that Ford designers visited the Spaceliner's debut incognito, watching crowds lose their minds. Internally, some claimed it inspired the long-roof Galaxies and fastback XLs to come, but officially, total radio silence. Beneath the body was a reworked FE Series 352 V8, backed by a Cruise-O-Matic. No horsepower figures were published because the car was never meant to run quarter miles. It was meant to stun, and it did. Just one was ever made. No production, no serial number, no dealership ever saw it. It toured autoramas, vanished for decades, and then resurfaced as a museum piece. Today, it's priceless. But if the Spaceliner was a sci-fi spaceship, the next Fairlane was a go-go missile dipped in gold and glitter. Still not street legal, but way more dangerous. And it actually had Ford's blessing. Sort of. Top 2 1966 Fairlane GT X A-Go. They called it A-Go, but it never went to production, and never was meant to. In 1966, Ford was on a mission to capture youth attention. Fast. The Mustang had launched a frenzy, and the Fairlane GT was gunning for street credibility. But at the fringes of the company, a skunkworks crew inside Ford's Special Projects division was building something weirder. It wasn't a performance test mule or a drag car, it was a visual bomb, the Fairlane GT X A-Go. Built for Ford's custom car caravan, the A-Go was a show rod in factory clothing. Draped in metallic gold flake with psychedelic green panel striping, it looked more like a Hot Wheels fever dream than something from Dearborn. A chrome side exhaust ran under its rocker panels. Deep dish Krager mags and a raked rear gave it that SoCal cruise stance. It was meant to spin heads, not tires. But then you open the door, and the absurdity hits overdrive. Crushed velvet upholstery, diamond-tufted headliner, mirrored ceiling, and a center console that rotated and lit up when the doors swung open. The seats were embroidered. The steering wheel was clear acrylic. It was both ridiculous and mesmerizing. And under that flash, the muscle was real. An S-Code 390 V8, factory-rated at 335 horsepower and 427 pound-feet, paired with a 4-speed top-loader. It could do 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds, if you could keep from slipping off the chrome pedal. Only one A-Go was ever built. It toured auto shows from coast to coast, then disappeared. No VIN, no production intent. It wasn't a prototype. It was performance art on wheels. A corporate fever dream dressed in gold flake. But while the A-Go seduced the crowd with crushed velvet and neon, the next Fairlane ditched the glam for raw power. A factory freak, built not to be seen, but feared. One that required a helmet, not a spotlight. Top 3. 1965 Fairlane. A. FX 4227. SOHC, Cammer. It looked like a Fairlane, but it ran like a hand grenade, and NHRA didn't want it anywhere near their tracks. It created drag strips. Ford needed an answer, and fast, so they threw out the rulebook. In a secluded shop, Ford engineers built a car that broke every boundary, the Fairlane AFX 427 SOHC Cammer. This wasn't a test mule, it was a weapon. Built on a lightweight Fairlane body, the front axle was moved forward for better weight transfer, giving it a Gosser stance. Fenders and hood were fiberglass, the bumpers were aluminum, the glass replaced with Lexan. The body was acid dipped to strip pounds. It was brutal, and it looked it. Inside there was no radio, no carpet, no excuses. Just a single racing bucket, a roll cage, and a tack screwed to the dash. Everything else was unnecessary weight. Under the hood sat Ford's secret doomsday device, the 427 SOHC Cammer. Chain-driven overhead cams, hemispherical combustion chambers, 12.51 compression. Ford rated it at 616 horsepower, but most believe it made 650 plus on open headers. It screamed to 7,800 RPM, mated to a 4-speed top loader and 4.86 gears. Order mile? Low 10s on bias-ply tires. Some say 9s if you dared push it, but here's the twist. NHRA banned it. Too fast, too unconventional, it didn't fit any class, it was never homologated. Ford didn't argue, they simply never acknowledged it existed. No VINs, no part numbers, just whispers in race shops. Only 3 to 6 were built, most disappeared, some were wrecked, a few survived, untitled, unrestored, unrepeatable. Today, they're unicorns. Even the experts argue which were real. The Fairlane Cammer wasn't just illegal, it was untouchable. A car too good to be sold, too fast to be fair. But where the Cammer was wild and unhinged, the next Fairlane prototype was cool, calculated, and armed with a badge Ford almost didn't approve. SCJ, Super Cobra Jet. The name said muscle, but the numbers said something else. Fear. Top 4, 1969, Fairlane Cobra 428 SCJ prototype. It looked like a company car, but it ran like an assassin, and it never showed up in Ford brochures. In 1969, Ford was on the brink of unleashing its deadliest street weapon, the 428 Super Cobra Jet. But before the public got a sniff, a few shadow-built Fairlanes were quietly handed over to the drag pack testing crew. These weren't labeled Torino GTs, they weren't even Cobras on paper, just bland bench-seat Fairlanes in fleet paint, each concealing a time bomb under the hood. Externally, they were sleepers. Dogdish hubcaps, steel wheels, no scoops, no stripes, the kind of car your uncle might have driven to work. But pop the hood and it was a different story. A hand-assembled 428 SCJ with oil cooler lines snaking through the grille, nodular iron crankshaft, heavy-duty rods, 11.51 compression, and a 780 CFM Holley 4-barrel carb. Out back, 4.3 gears, staggered shocks, and traction bars bolted straight to subframes. This wasn't a marketing prototype, it was a test mule. These Fairlanes were never supposed to be photographed, let alone survive. They were driven hard, torn down, rebuilt, and eventually scrapped. Or, so Ford thought. At least one example escaped that fate, surfacing years later in unrestored condition, wearing its original T-code dash and factory chalk marks. Untitled, unregistered, but terrifyingly real. Ford never released build numbers. Most insiders estimate 4 to 6 units. These cars were tested under false names at drag strips across the Midwest. One early test sheet, buried in internal documents, showed 12-second quarter-mile on-stock tires. No headers, no tuning, just brute force. This was Ford's way of getting ahead by going underground. The SCJ Fairlane Mule laid the groundwork for the 1969-70 Torino Cobra, but it did so in silence. No fanfare, no VIN recognition. It was the ultimate backdoor muscle car, hidden behind base-model trim. But while the SCJ Mule prowled with brute force, the next Fairlane prototype ditched displacement for deception. 2 turbos, 0 emblems, and enough torque to snap axles without warning. It didn't look fast, but it broke rules. And next, top 5, 1966, Fairlane twin-turbo sleeper. It had no scoops, no stripes, and no sound. just 2 turbos and an appetite for V8. In 1966, while most of Detroit was chasing cubic inches, a small group of engineers inside Ford was chasing something different: stealth power. Hidden in a quiet corner of the engineering division, they built a Fairlane like no other, one not designed for the showroom or the racetrack, but for silent speed. From the outside, it looked like any Fairlane 500 post sedan: beige paint, dogdish hubcaps, chrome delete trim, and a vinyl bench seat. It wore a column shift automatic and no badging whatsoever. Most people would walk right by it. But beneath the steel hood lurked something heretical: a 289 Hypo V8 with twin turbochargers mounted low in the engine bay, feeding a fabricated intake plenum and custom fuel injection system. The exhaust was routed through baffled side dumps, hidden beneath the rear quarters. The intercoolers were stashed behind the grille, tucked behind a blackout panel. Even the tachometer was hidden inside the glove box. This car wasn't built to impress. It was built to deceive. Output estimates vary wildly. Some engineers claimed over 500 horsepower, while internal memos referenced comparable acceleration to the 427 Cobra. One test mule reportedly ran 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, with high 12-sec quarter-mile times on street tires. Only 1 or 2 prototypes were ever built. They were not photographed. No documentation was made public. One was seen at Dearborn Proving Grounds running full boost passes while engineers stood by with notebooks and timers. But shortly after, the project was shelved, canceled due to cost, fuel inconsistency, and emissions regulations. No cars survived, at least none officially. This Fairlane didn't roar, it hissed, and then it vanished. But if the twin-turbo sleeper was a silent assassin, the next Fairlane was a public spectacle, complete with badges, stripes, and fastback flair. A Torino in name but not in spirit. And under the sheet metal, a one-off concept that never got its production green light. Top 6. 1968 Fairlane-based Torino GT concept. It had the body of a Torino, the heart of a Fairlane, and the fate of a concept car never meant to live. Before the 1968 Torino GT hit the streets, Ford built something bolder. Internally dubbed the Fairlane Fastback concept, this car was a design mule. A one-off styling prototype meant to preview Ford's upcoming mid-size coupe. But it didn't wear a Torino badge. It wore the Fairlane name. And it looked better than anything that followed. Built on a pre-production Fairlane chassis, the concept featured a low-slung fastback roofline, sleeker than the final production Torino. The C-pillar was thinner, the glass wrapped deeper, and the stance was lower and wider. The body was sprayed in candy apple red with satin black hood accents, while subtle pinstriping outlined the fenders. It rode on 15-inch redline tires tucked under concept-only wheel flares. Inside, Ford gave it flair. Twin bucket seats, an experimental wraparound dash, and a console with toggle switches and rally gauges made it feel more Thunderbird than Fairlane. A wood-rimmed steering wheel, full instrumentation, and even power window switches were fitted, none of which made it to the production GT. Under the hood sat a hand-fitted 428 Cobra jet paired to a C6 automatic and a 3.911 traction lock rear axle. Headers fed into dual side exit pipes hidden beneath flared rocker panels. No emissions gear, no compromise. Only one car was built. It toured Ford's internal design clinics and appeared at a few auto shows, then vanished. Some say it was crushed. Others whisper it was sold to a Ford executive and quietly stored. No VIN, no title, no official mention. This Fairlane wasn't built to sell, it was built to seduce. But when the time came, Ford chose a milder version. This one was too sharp, too risky, too real. And yet, while the concept stayed polished and pure, the next Fairlane came out swinging. No badges, no chrome. Just bare steel, acid-dipped panels, and a 427 block with a single mission: dominate or die. Top 7. 1966 Fairlane 427R Code Lightweight. It had no creature comforts, no insulation, and no room for hesitation. Just a 427 and a mission: quarter-mile domination. In 1966, Ford wasn't playing catch-up anymore. It was hunting, and the prey was Mopar. The Fairlane 427R Code Lightweight was never advertised to the masses. This car was built in the shadows, intended only for sanctioned racers and fearless wheelmen. The goal? Strip it down, beef it up. Let it eat. Built on the Fairlane 500 shell, The lightweight package ditched everything unnecessary. No radio, no heater, no seam sealer, no sound deadening. The hood and fenders were fiberglass, the bumpers aluminum, and the inner structure was acid-dipped to shave every pound possible. Even the floor mats were optional, if you could call them that. At the heart was Ford's top-shelf FE, the 427 cubic inch high-riser, rated at 425 horsepower but closer to 500 plus in race trim. It breathed through dual 4-barrel Hollies with 12.51 compression, solid lifters, and a deep sump oil pan. The top-loader 4-speed threw power to 4.56 gears in a locked rear. Launches were violent. ETs dipped into the low 11s. On slicks, some hit 10s, and yet Ford never promoted them. Why? Because these weren't showroom trophies. They were track assassins. Sold only through select dealers, often via handshake agreements, these Fairlanes didn't just avoid the street, they weren't legal for it. But even this brute had rules to follow. The next Fairlane didn't. It broke them all. No VIN, no dealership, no compromise. It was so dangerous Ford built it once and then erased it from the record books. Thunderbolt engaged. Top 8. 1964 Fairlane Thunderbolt. It wasn't just a car. It was a factory-delivered threat. Too fast to be fair, too wild to be street legal. In 1964, the muscle car wars weren't about image. They were about quarter miles. Ford had seen enough Hemis dominate NHRA strips, and it was time to respond with something unhinged. The result was the Fairlane Thunderbolt, a no-nonsense missile disguised as a midsize coupe. At first glance, it looked like a stripped Fairlane 500, but closer inspection told a different story. The front clip was fiberglass, the side windows were plexiglass, and the interior was barren. No visors, no armrests, no radio, no carpet. Even the passenger side wiper was deleted. Everything that didn't help it go faster was thrown out. Under the teardrop hood lived Ford's most savage motor yet, the 427 cubic inch FE high-riser, stuffed with dual Holley 4-barrels, aluminum heads, and 12.51 compression. It was officially rated at 425 horsepower, but in reality pushed over 600 horsepower in drag trim. Backed by a top-loader 4-speed or a specially prepped automatic, it could run 10.8 seconds in the quarter mile with slicks. On a stock chassis, only 100 Thunderbolts were built, 49 automatics, 51 manuals. Assembly wasn't done at the main plant. It was handled by Dearborn Steel Tubing, DIST, with help from Ford's Special Vehicle Department. These weren't just sold. Buyers had to sign waivers acknowledging the car had no warranty, wasn't emissions legal, and wasn't street registered. This was a race tool, plain and simple. The NHRA took one look and cried foul. After dominating the 1964 season, Thunderbolts were banned from Superstock. Ford quietly ended the program. Many Thunderbolts were raced to death. Survivors today number fewer than 65, and clean originals fetch $250,000 plus at auction. The Thunderbolt wasn't refined. It was raw, not a muscle car. A machine gun with license plates. The Thunderbolt didn't fade. It detonated. In a single model year, it shattered records, broke rules, and scared sanctioning bodies into rewriting the rulebook. It wasn't pulled from production. It was dragged off stage, too fast, too loud, too real for the corporate world, and in its silence it left behind a trail of broken axles, wide eyes, and a single question: what if Ford hadn't backed down? These 8 Fairlanes weren't just rare. They were ghosts. Built in silence, banned from competition, denied to customers. They show us what happens when engineers are unleashed with no marketing department watching. Some lived fast and died forgotten. Others never even left the prototype floor, but each left behind a whisper in Ford's muscle car legacy, proof that the wildest machines are the ones we were never supposed to see. If you loved this deep dive into forbidden muscle, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, which secret Fairlane would you bring back from the shadows?